Good morning and greetings to all of you in Atlantic Canada. We're delighted to be here today to talk about the online environment of South Korea and how your business can develop in South Korea using online global tools like websites and social media. Just while the last of you are logging on, I think I'll do a quick introduction for those of you who don't already know us and know these webinar series. So my name is Susanna Hardy. I'm Chief Content Officer at IBT Online. I'm really delighted to be here today and to talk about South Korea. I have not been joined today by Samantha. Many of you, I guess, will know Samantha by now if you've attended other webinars. She has an important obligation she couldn't get out of, so it's just me. Sorry about that. But I am really delighted to be joined by Erin. Erin Smith is the Program Manager of the CBDC Nova Scotia. And also she'll be sort of coordinating and managing this online global program for the Atlantic Canada companies. So she is the absolute best person to get to know and to field all your questions to. If you have questions about the program, about the grants available, eligibility, and so on. A very quick word about who we are as a company. IBT Online. We're a US company, but really delighted to be working with you in Canada. We've been around for quite a long time, since 2002, which is long in the internet world. And we designed a program called the Online Global Program for Atlantic Canada companies to allow Atlantic Canada companies to access the world via their websites and online marketing. So it's e-commerce websites or not e-commerce, whatever. I will talk about that in due course. Today, our focus is also going to be on South Korea. So it's not this is probably a smaller cohort than what we normally have for our webinars, but I'm really delighted that you could take the time out. I know it's a busy time of month as well. I mean, December is always busy. So I'm delighted that you could take the time out to learn more about the South Korean market and online environment and what websites look good and perform well in that market, and how to engage with your prospects and potential buyers in that market. So our agenda today, really, we're going to focus in on very briefly sort of the touchstones of South Korea, sort of offline, and then really just stick onto the online part. We're going to be analyzing as well what makes a good Korean website, social media as well, which is really amazing in South Korea and very dynamic. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the Atlantic Canada Online Global Programs, and then we've got some time at the end for questions. So please drop your questions into the question box, into the chat box there as we go. And I'll be happy to field any questions. One thing I have to say as well, I've most of the time I've put South Korea. Every now and then I just put Korea. It's actually the Republic of Korea. I haven't used that, I think, once. So where you see Korea, it's always the Republic of Korea, except where otherwise stated North Korea. A little snippet of information about North Korea. Now, before we talk about South Korean environment, I thought we'd do a little bit of a recap about what the resources are for you, for Atlantic Canada companies, what we call a helping hand. And there's several places you can find those resources for those online global programs. And one of them is on our website, so ibt.onl is our website, and we've got a dedicated page for the Canada companies, and in particular for the Atlantic provinces. And there you can find all the information about the programs, about what it means to have websites, what kind of websites, and so on. But we were really, really struck with how the Atlantic Canada provinces came together. All 4 provinces came together and said, what do we need to give our companies right now? What would make a difference for our companies in today's environment, pandemic or no pandemic, looking forward in 2021, what's going to drive our companies for their international businesses? And we know you've all got great products. We know you're all ready to trade. We know you've got the right staff and the right people in place. What tool can we give our Canadian companies to really allow them to reach globally. So that was when these sort of Atlantic and online global programs were started up. And for that, there's a lot of dedicated resources, I said, including these webinars, where you can listen to the previous recordings of it if you want, of the subjects covered, from e-commerce to compliance to what is a localized website. We also have short videos on many of those as well. And then we've got 2 more webinars coming up on Southeast Asia and also on the USA. So if you have an interest in those 2 markets, join us next week for that. And as I said, you can always listen to back copies, or just circle around and send me an email, and I'll send you the links of any of the countries or topics that you're interested in. And with that, I'd like to ask Aaron to step in and just say a brief word about the Nova Scotia Association of CBDCs, the CBDCs in general, and what they provide. Aaron.
Perfect. Thanks, Susanna. So I'm happy to be here today and excited to learn more about South Korea, or the Republic of Korea. Now, I know the right words to use that. For those of you who are new to our webinar series, I'm Erin Smith, Executive Director with the Nova Scotia Association of CBDCs, and I'm delivery agent for the project that's hosting these webinars. So the online global programs, they are made possible through the Atlantic Trade and Investment Growth Agreement. That's a partnership of the federal government through ACOA and the 4 Atlantic provincial governments. So our goal is to provide you with what you need in terms of information, tools to export via online channels. And at any time, if you're looking for more information on other programs or supports, your local government folks are a great resource. If you don't know who they are, reach out to me and I can connect you with the right person for your region. And I'll also mention briefly the second component of the online global program. We will talk about this at the end. But in addition to these webinars, we've got funding available for website localization. So you'll work with IBT Online, you'll create an online export roadmap and a localized website for your target market. The cost of this, including that roadmap work, is $17,500, and we provide $15,000. So it's a really great deal. Spots are limited. The deadline to apply is December 17th, so I encourage you to get working on those applications. The links will be put in the chat at some point during the webinar, and they'll be on the screen there as well. And I'll be here for the whole webinar and can answer any questions when we get to the end. So enjoy. Thanks.
Thank you, Erin. Right, let's just dive right in then and start talking about South Korea. I thought I would start with our expertise is the online world. So it's not our business to really talk about the offline world, as it were, sort of the macroeconomics and things like that. But I thought I would just highlight a couple of the things that strike us when we're working on Korean websites. So this isn't really a sort of like how to do business in South Korea. That's not our, we can tell you how to do business online, but that's our core. But some of the things that really strike us when we do Korean websites, I guess the first is the neighbors. And this, the demilitarized zone, the DMZ or DMZ, whatever it's called, is about 2.5 miles wide and stretches along that little bit of peninsula there. It's about 100 miles long, I think, since 1953. And it divides North Korea and South Korea, obviously. And really, it permeates. The fact of North Korea being there permeates everything you do in South Korea, and business relationships, and especially online. And I'll show you some examples of that later. But it really comes to the fore when you're talking about trust and hacking and all these things. So it really is a major, major influencer. Other than that, very influenced also by what's going on in China. And we'll see that again on some of the online sides. But also very much also wary and with an eye on Russia, but also then Japan, Taiwan, and the greater world. A very, very outward-looking market for the online market in Korea. As I said, the sort of North Korea sits on the shoulder of everything you do online in Korea. And I'll show you some examples. The other thing clearly is that internet connections are just phenomenal. You can be in the metro, 3 stories down, and you've got perfect internet access. So it's you know, I think it's won the world's fastest internet connection award every year for the last 12 years. It's even faster than what you have in parts of like Finland and things. So it's really amazing. And it has also, I think, the highest per capita rate of, well, you know, in terms of, you know, 4G network. It also is rolling out 5G network. It is also done by a lot of what I would call tech junkies. These people adopt things quickly. Anything that's tech related is adopted very quickly. As I said, 5G is rolled out since last year. You know, everybody has mobile phones, which are smartphones, obviously. You know, that sort of thing. So very, and I'll show some examples about how much they are involved in gaming, in you know, pods for the home, smart home apps, all kinds of things. You know, the kind of apps where they fill your fridge up with when you're not there, and you know, put the heating on, light the lights, everything is very, very commonplace in Korea. And then the other thing that strikes you when you're doing online business is that it's this real land of contrasts. On the one side, you've got tech junkies and things like that, and you've got, you know, Gangnam Style, K-pop, whatever. And on the other side, you have very, very, very deeply rooted Confucius values, and you know, people dress conservatively. They are conservative. Their website user experience and designs are very old-fashioned. So really a big contrast there. Some of those things. A couple more, just sort of, I guess, you know, headline basics, as it were. Population 52 million, GDP about the same as Canada, interestingly enough. So that's interesting. It's South Korea is Canada's 6th largest trading partner, and a lot of that obviously is from the electronic side and so on. And then from Canada, a lot of it is raw materials, but also then chemicals, food production, and fish products. Canada signed the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement. It's the first, only one that they have in the Far East. That was in 2014. And I also wanted to highlight there are over 200,000 Canadians of Korean origin. And Koreans, I'm sure if you've ever been involved in, you know, universities in Canada, there's a large student population of Koreans as well. So there's a lot of things that actually link Canada to South Korea. So just a couple of those basics there, leave you with. And I guess this last slide, just to say, getting back to my point about modern and traditional, you know, these Confucian values of very hierarchical, you know, behaving very virtuously, working very, very hard, and learning very, very hard. We all have those stories about, you know, South Korean kids at school, and avoiding extremes and so on. But on the other hand, I think South Korea has the highest rate of cosmetic surgery in the world. 1 woman in 3 in Korea below the age of 40 has had cosmetic surgery. It has the highest alcohol consumption on average in the world. And that's pretty amazing, since women in South Korea pretty well don't drink. So, you know, this is this men drinking culture after hours with work is really prevalent. So again, there's a big contrast for this. So very much early adopters, techie, this pop culture, whether it's KP or whether it's Gangnam Style, and on the other side, these very deeply rooted Confucian values. 2 other things which are really important when you're building websites. Numbers. Now, Koreans count, like quite a few people in North Asia and in Asia, they count. Like I say, that you start with the 1. You start at the 1. So when you're born, for example, you're born at 1. You then go to your 2nd birthday, right? If you go for an overnight business trip, you're going for a 2-day trip. So even if you're returning the next day, you're going for a 2-day trip. So careful on the numbers, and that means, like, you know, 5 million is 510,000s. So our recommendation, especially when you're doing websites, and especially on anything in e-commerce, write it down. A lot easier to judge and make sure that you have the right one then. And the other one, obviously, beware of dates. There's a lot of references to lunar calendars. Chuseok is the lunar New Year usually happens around February, March. So a lot of people are still talking about lunar dates rather than Gregorian calendar. Those two things come into play when you've got websites. Now let's look at South Korea online. So I said 51 million people, 51.5 million people, the vast majority of them living in cities. They have way more phones than people. They have 60 million mobile phones. Almost 99% of them are smartphones. So 51 million people, 60 million phones, 49 million people are on the internet. So 96% internet penetration rate. So yeah, this is huge. And virtually everybody on the internet is on social media. These are pretty stunning numbers. These are numbers that blow a lot of countries out of the water. 96% penetration rate of the internet. That compares with Canada, which has about a 67-70% penetration rate. It's right up there with little tiny countries like UAE. So this is really stunning. And I guess the point as well, we go back to that thing about the infrastructure. The fact that they have 4G and means also and very fast internet use means that they really can access the internet, and they do access the internet at all times. So I wanted to flag up as well the mobile internet use. So I said, 46 million people on mobile internet users. They're almost all on smartphones, and they spend about 2.5 hours a day on average on their smartphones. Now that's about half the time that they're online. So your typical South Korean is online using the internet for about 5.5 hours per day. And as I said, about half of that is on their phone. So that's quite important again when you start looking at internet and how to build good websites and how to engage with your prospects online. Internet speeds, as I mentioned earlier, is just it's what we all want. And it's they continue to invest. So the change in average speed of internet connections last year grew by 100%, and that was with the rollout of 5G. So really amazing infrastructure there for you. And I wanted to show you as well this slide about sort of what people are doing. I said they spend about 5.5 hours a day on the internet. If you assume that most people are in the office doing that, there's a lot of other stuff that people that South Koreans do that is way more than, for example, you would do in Canada. To have someone say that they spend 40% of their time listening to vlogs and watching vlogs, this is just a phenomenal. The equivalent, I don't have the equivalent number in Canada, but it's below 10%. Watching online videos, 92% of South Koreans are watching online videos, usually on their phone. So they're very, very active and very, as I said, very techy, very early adopters of things. Now, this slide here just shows you, okay, where are they going when they go on the internet? They do go to, some non-Korean websites. They do go to .coms, but if you look, they're not actually regular ones. They're not the normal ones. There's something called Naver, and I'm going to tell you about that in a minute. But even Taobao, for example, number 12, that's a Chinese e-commerce website. And Tmall.com is a Chinese e-commerce website. So looking through this, there are actually very few that are the big US giants that we know that are in English. They do go to Amazon.com, but there is a very strong competitor in Korea, and the Amazon.com they're going to have is filtered with the Korean. And when you look at all this, you say, okay, this is still an approachable market, surely. But then look at what they're searching. what they're searching, okay, there is the word Google, there is the word YouTube, but the rest, Naver, but the rest is all in Korean. This is a very sophisticated online market. They expect things to be in Korean, to be what, there's more than enough for them on their own environment to be a closed environment. They don't need to search outside their environment to find what they need. So if you are interested in connecting with prospects and your buyer persona in the Korean market, you need to be on their terms. The last thing I really wanted to highlight was getting back, I guess, to this thing about North Korea. South Korea has one of the highest levels of expressed concern about what's real or fake on the internet, expressed concern about how they use personal data, and 46% regularly delete cookies from their web browser in the last month. Again, that is a phenomenal number. 46% of those 50 million people, so half of them basically, are deleting all their cookies each month on all their devices. And again, this is, if you look at other markets, look at Canada, I mean, the numbers would be something like 10%. And this really is to do with North Korea. And especially in the last few years, since 2014, really, when we had some big hacking going on from North Korea, that really came to the fore. There were, I think, two in particular, which really meant that it brought it to the attention. In November 2014, they launched a big cyber attack on Sony, and that was because there was this film called The Interview, which didn't portray them very well. So they launched a big internet cyber attack on Sony. And then just after that, there was a big North Korean attack on Bangladesh Bank. And they stole $1 billion from the Bangladesh Central Bank. And then, of course, there's WannaCry in 2017, which really affected over 150 countries. And in the last 3 years, North Korea has done it's really been striking to see. Internet penetration rate in North Korea is tiny. It's one of the lowest in the world. North Korean population, by the way, is about 22 million people. Something like 14,000 have internet access. So nothing. I think it's the last in the world, with Yemen and Somalia, I think, in terms of internet access. But what's happened is that North Korea has made cyber attacks and cyber criminality a mainstay of the national government, especially in the last couple of years. And there's basically now what they do is basically they have a state-run version of the web, and they basically employ half their army basically to do cyber attacks, in particular for cryptocurrency. A lot of estimates say they're getting what they can of the economy all through illegal cryptocurrency. And you can see this on this map here on the left-hand side, this North Korean GDP, which has increased despite all the sanctions and so on. So as I said, there's like 20,000 internet users as of June 2019, 0.1% penetration rate of the population. So the fact that South Korea has this huge, probably the world's largest hacker on its border, colors everything you do on the web in Korea. And we'll see how that works as well when we talk about compliance, hosting, things like that. But it really does affect your social media and your web in particular. Right, let's talk directly about great Korean websites. But maybe before I do that, I'm going to launch a quick poll just to see whether whether you're already doing business in South Korea. Are you already active in South Korea? Do you have in-market partners, or have you established a subsidiary? Are you online already? Where are you on it? Are you thinking about it? Are you with an in-market partner only, or online only? Maybe that would be something I can give you the beginnings of some feedback on that. I think so far nobody has said that they are online only. Oh well, but many of you have an in-market partner, and that's the classic way to go ahead with South Korea, is to find an in-market partner, and that's probably the one of the easiest ways to go. It's not an easy market. You need an in-market partner to go about that. Thank you very much for voting on that on a closed out poll, and start talking about websites. And I think the interesting thing about really great Korean websites is if you've got an in-market partner, then the best tool you can give that market partner is a dedicated website. Just imagine what your distributor could do if he had a Korean language website that functioned well in South Korea. Right. Worldwide, there's only about 3 countries in the world where the default search engine is not Google, and that is Russia, China, South Korea. South Korea developed its own search engine back in about 1999 called Naver, and it's actually it's got its place in the world, but it really only functions in South Korea. It's used by South Koreans for search functionality, but especially for all of its other products, and it's quite unique in that sense. It more resembles a Baidu or a WeChat than it does a Google, although Google has moved towards that model as well. So, Naver has a whole portfolio of products that it has to try and attract users. The primary products that you have to be aware of is something called Naver Encyclopedia, Knowledge, Naver Blog, it's very important, and Naver Cafe. These are all really important to get to know and to use when you're using a website in South Korea. And the whole point about Naver is that it has a slightly different algorithm than Google, and functions much closer to sort of a Baidu model, as I said. When a user conducts your own search on Naver, you don't always actually get organic results. You get results which are expressed by Naver, but it'll be in a whole series of things. So you won't just get a bunch of websites links. You'll get images, blog posts, blogs, then some content. So you'll have a whole bunch of things for that. And so these are called both vertical searches, and you'll get the as I said before, those knowledge, the cafes, the blogs, and so on. This is a screenshot of what it might look like when you do a search. So for example, on the left-hand side, you put something in. In this case, I put in marketing, and you'll get a whole bunch of things. And some of them are obviously paid, but they're not just searches with links to websites. As I said before, there are links to Naver Blog, to Naver Cafe, to paid search ads, and that's because they have a colored background, books that have been released on it or whatever. So it's much more diverse in a sense than Google. On the right-hand side, you see a search for LG. And here what's interesting is the Naver has a special function just for companies and brands. And I've circled that in red. That's where you see LG, and that's their brands. And so if you're looking for companies that do LG, then you would immediately those would be popping up. So it's structured in a different way from Google. And that's, I think, one of the keys is how then do you structure your website in order to function both on the Google and on Naver. And if Naver are doing things like this that are attracting this wider field from cafe, blog, knowledge base, and then your separate area just for brands, how do you do keywords? What do you do for keywords? Quick reminder also of keywords and how important they are for your to localize for your localized websites. This is a screenshot that I've taken in a couple of the webinars. It just shows you the importance of using the right keyword for the right market. You know, if you're using the word trem and you're in Portugal, 2% of people on internet in Portugal use the word trem. So that's not the right word to use, especially if you've got Google ad campaigns, because that's costing you money. So that's, you know, you're paying money to Google for nothing. So make sure your words are correct. And in South Korea, the difficulty with Naver is that you're not getting that little organic search. So what we found works really well is to make sure that you're tracking the keywords for both Google and Naver. And you know, you can track them and monitor them for both search engines. Even if you build your website on a Google platform, you can then do keyword research using Naver as well. And then the second thing is that you never use keywords alone in South Korea. Always assume that right from the start, you will be ranked by your blogs, by the information you're giving, by vlogs, you know, video blogs. So any kind of social media interacts with it. All the sort of paraphernalia that go around a website ranks your website in Naver. So if you want your website to perform well in South Korea, you've got to think social media and more information right from the start, and in different formats right from the start. So your website needs blogs right from the start, needs an RSS feed to YouTube or to blogs that you're putting out there in order for it to rank in South Korea. Next, we're going to go on to domain names. Domain names can be tricky. The top level domain name for South Korea is .kr. The bad news is it's restricted. So if you're a Canadian company and you don't have a Korean subsidiary, you cannot buy it. But your agent and your distributor in South Korea can buy it for you. There are also companies that advertise that they can do this. We would really recommend you not to do that. We would recommend that you do not use companies that advertise that service. Basically because you won't have control over that domain name in the future. And it's a lot easier to get your in-market partner, your distributor, your agent in South Korea to buy and register your domain name for you. Then you sign a letter of agreement with that distributor saying, okay, you bought it from me, but it's for my use only. And then you build your website on that .kr for that distributor to be used, for example. So that's the way would we recommend going about that. Here you have an example of a website we did recently for, it's actually a logistics company, but called Warfighter Focused Logistics.kr. And again, they had a local distributor who could help them there. So one of the main reasons they wanted that website really was to support that in-market partner, to make sure that that in-market partner had the right tools to engage with his wider audience, and also to show commitment to the Korean market, because they are in the logistics side and again in the military side. They wanted to show that they have a long-term commitment and are staying there, and therefore invest in a South Korean website. Characters. Korean characters are so much easier than Japanese and Chinese, and there isn't a simplified Chinese. You know, it's way easier, much more streamlined. And the picture of this golden man is this man, this general who was ruling South Korea, I think in like the 15th century or something. I can't even remember his name now, but he basically, up to then, Korea used Chinese characters. He just said overnight, stop this, we're going to do our own alphabet, our own thing, and it's going to make everybody literate, back in the 15th century. And so he designed something called the Hangul. Hangul is 24 letters, 14 consonants, 10 vowels. And they're really, you know, I've given them the 10 consonants and the 14 consonants and the 10 vowels there on your screen. They're really easy to read, and it makes websites so much easier. The only complication is that they go left to right and vertically. So sometimes it makes the websites look a bit chaotic and difficult to read, but Koreans are used to it. This also changes your user experience when you have these characters. For one thing, the characters use less space. so much shorter text. So this might change the design of your website. We saw this when we talked about Japan. Same is true of China and Arabic actually as well. When you've got characters that represent words, you can have a lot shorter content, and that can change part of your design. Kind of like what we talked about in Japan, the websites can look a little bit cluttered and over busy, and why is there no white space? Why is it not clean? But that's the way Koreans like to see it. And partly, I think this is because of Naver, again, that search engine, who's really, it was founded by Yahoo in the early 2000s, and that's where they took their model from. And a lot of the websites look old. They look old-fashioned. They look sort of yesterday's design, and they're not clean, easy, navigatable, functional websites that you would expect now. But nonetheless, you can create very nice, clean websites for your Korean website for your Korean agent. And that's, functions just as well, and it's very well taken up. And for example, this one, Trace Zero, when we put it out there, the Koreans went, "Oh, wow, this is really pretty." So it was nice to see that that they also appreciated the a sort of a cleaner look or a more traditional Western look on the design. Equally, this is another example of a company with a Korean website. I wanted to point out two things on this. First is that the name of the company, in best practice, we've kept it the same. So Sterling Companies stays Sterling Companies. Although you could have a Korean equivalent. Koreans are used to doing English for business, and they're used to seeing the name of the companies in English. They're fine with that. But what really helps them is just to have the content and all in Korean, and then obviously also localized for Naver for that. Again, the objective of this website was, again, to support the local partner and also to generate leads for that local partner. And I wanted to include this screenshot as well because it has a form at the end, which is, contact us form, which was used to generate leads, because it then goes directly to the in-market partner and also to the sales team of Sterling Companies. So that Sterling Companies also had a window of who their end clients were. And they could see exactly how many people were applying for the request a quote and contact us and download the products and things like that. So all those calls to action, all those CTAs were being seen both by the in-market distributor and by the company at home. So that's I think really important, that you get a view of who your end client is. It's the only way to build long-term brand recognition. A last thing to really highlight for South Korean websites is their digital compliance. Again, this comes back to that North Korea thing. They have one of the strictest digital compliance regimes in the world, and they brought it in force actually even before the GDPR of Europe. It's similar to GDPR with an extra little bits on certain sectors, notably IT sectors, finance sectors have extra obligations. The onus of responsibility is clearly on the data controller. That means you, by the way. So the onus of responsibility is clearly on the company, not on the person looking at it. So this Personal Information Protection Act was recently reinforced by the Digital Signature Act, which comes into force this month. And it has a lot of muscle to it. There's some pretty hefty sanctions if you are seen flaunting the PIPA. Obviously, all websites we build are digitally compliant, obviously. Quick word then on social media in Korea. Really, really important to get it right. And again, it is quite different from what you might be used to. I said that sort of 49 million people out of 51 million people are on the internet. 45 million of them are using social media. So, 87% of the Korean population are using social media, and they're using it for several, for quite a long time. They're using it for over an hour a day, typically also through their mobile phone. But it's absolutely ubiquitous for it, and there's a lot of different types of platforms as well that one should be aware of. South Korea really does have the sort of the perfect environment for social media. Internet is absolutely ubiquitous. Everybody owns a smartphone. It's the #1 in the world for smartphone ownership. Obviously, 4G is everywhere. 5G is rolling out very quickly, and it ranks #3 in the world for active social media use for that. But if you look on the left, that little thing compiled by Mitaro, you can see that there's some, okay, I can recognize Facebook and Instagram, but who's Kakao Talk and Band and Naver Cafe? Well, we've talked about that before, but some of these other people, who are those? And the #1 that they're talking about is Kakao Talk. Actually, the statistics we have, the #1 is actually YouTube, which we count as a social media platform, definitely. It's also used as a search engine after all. And remember, YouTube in South Korea is in Korean. Okay, and it's a great place for you to go on and use your YouTube that you might have for your Canadian website, and just put the subtitles in, or a voiceover, whichever you prefer, and that works really well. And then upload it onto your website as a pop-up, and it works really well in terms of engagement. But you'll see the #2 is Kakao Talk. Okay, there's Facebook, Instagram. Facebook and Instagram have each about 6 million. That's it. But then you're quickly into these other ones. Copain d'avant, Kakao Story, TikTok, Line, WeChat. All these ones that are not always known so well in Canada. And if you look again at the top search queries, for example, on YouTube, they're all in Korean. So again, it's this notion of having a very sort of inward-looking environment. They don't need to go to YouTube Canada to find the right YouTube. They can find whatever they need in Korean. It's up to you as a company to make sure that you're presenting and showing them what they want to see, when they want to see it, how they want to see it. For that. So just quickly going through some of these big ones, I think the one to talk about here is Kakao Talk. And Kakao Talk actually is a merger between Daum and Kakao Talk. They merged. They were both digital service providers, and they now have. It's about Daum is, I think, the 3rd largest search engine now in South Korea after Naver and Google. And really, it's much more sort of like it's like a WhatsApp and all the rest. It's more like a WeChat, in fact, because it tries to give a whole environment. So I've listed there on the left-hand side some of the things that you can do with Daum, similar to Naver. There's a blog, a cafe, where it's a meeting place. There's an education side. There's apps for your car, for your savings, for movies, everything. And these are apps similar to WeChat that try to be a one-stop shop. You go onto Daum, you don't need to leave it. You can do your banking, your medical, your online chat, everything. So it's much more like a sort of WeChat. It did that diversification strategy quite early on, and I think companies like Facebook and Google are catching up. Whatever. So if you're on Kakao Talk, you can buy your friend a pizza whenever you want, check your bank account, whatever. It remains very, very popular in Korea, as we've seen. Naver, I've talked about already, is a search engine. It's more than a search engine. It calls itself a web portal. And again, it's trying to say to people, if you come onto me, you don't need to go anywhere else. You can stay within my environment. And we have a whole bunch of apps that you can use, including this one called Band. And Band is really, it's a communication app for teams. And in fact, it's used by the Korean Army, but it's for any kind of group, from gaming. It started actually in the gaming community, but now it's like everywhere for any group you can think of. It's like a WhatsApp groups. And South Korean will have up to 10 or 20 different groups within their band portal for that. And as I said, they have all these different areas. For example, here, advanced management. You can manage projects. There's project management systems on Band. It's really tries to be a single environment for everything. I wanted to mention SciWorld as well. SciWorld is the original social media app for Korea. It started, I can't remember when it started, 1999 or something like that. So a long time ago, before Twitter, before Facebook. And it was developed in South Korea as a unique platform. It still exists, although it's been losing market share. You can organize, manage, prioritize relationships according to a hierarchy of ranks. There are 3 or 4 different ranks within SciWorld. But it has really since declined, and since about 2012, it has reduced its prevalence very much, particularly with the younger generation. And there's a real age divide in Korea, with the under 24-year-old Koreans spending about a third of their time on Facebook and Instagram. Well, anyone over 40 are still on KakaoTalk, Naver, Band, and Kakao Story. So, and goes without saying that the Facebook that the young kids are on are obviously in Korean, obviously. So there we go. That's a sort of a big picture. The right kind of Hangzhou characters and so on. The media environment. Now I'm going to talk very quickly about the Canada Online Global Programs and what these are, and how these can hopefully help you when you're looking at getting some international websites. So these were designed with the Atlantic provinces, and on the right-hand side there's a list of things about how the program will help you. Basically, it comes down to driving your top line. Online tools like websites and social media are all about driving your sales, growing your sales, growing your exports. Whether you call that brand awareness or lead generation or whatever it is, it's just about getting top line growth. And that's what these things are made to do. And in this case, made to do so internationally. Today we're talking about Korea. So we've designed sort of this option A, option B, and option E, E for e-commerce. Option A is 1 or 2 market expansion. And for that, you've got, we will build you, for example, a South Korean and a Mexican website, or just one big South Korean website. There is a predefined scope to it. It's exactly that many pages, that many words, and so on. But these are good, functioning, optimized websites, highly localized, highly effective in their market. Option B is basically for anything customized. You say, option A doesn't fit me. What I actually want is a whole new web design, go through something totally different. So you define the scope of work, but we will build it wherever it is you want. And option E is for e-commerce. And again, that scope of work depends on you and how many SKUs, what you want on it. We build the websites for you, manage them for you as well. And in each case, grants are available, as Erin was saying, up to $15,000. So really, for option A, for example, the total budget I think is $17,500. So really, yeah, as Erin said, it's a great deal. The provinces are really stepping up to help you here. This is an example of an option A that we built for a company well, actually, they did it twice. So we built them Canadian website, a French Canadian website, a Mexican, a Chinese, and an Indian website for them. But that was twice option A for that. And as I said, the budget is $16,000 for that, and for the website, and $15,000 is paid for by the grant. Again, this an additional $1,500 for a marketing plan. Here's another example of the option A and option B, and here an example of companies who are really keen to make sure that they had the same branding image. We're going to do one in Mexico and in Saudi Arabia, and it was really important to have a similar brand, similar color branding type, no matter where they were. So here, for example, in Saudi or in Latin America. An example of option B was a total web redesign, bringing them, totally new websites for them in Mexico, and integrating that with their CMS and their content and their CRM in particular. So again, grants are available for the same amount. Here's just another example of this. This is just a Chinese website in option B for that. And then option E, as I said, is an e-commerce one. And here the budget, if you're looking for a small e-commerce site with, say, 20 pages, 100 SKUs, that would be the same as an option A. But if you've got lots of SKUs, 500 SKUs, stock keeping units, then we're talking like about $40,000. And in each case, again, the grants are available. If I may, I would like to just ask you all, have you already applied? Is this something that you're interested in? Have you already applied for these grants? So again, there's a little poll open for you. If you have interest in applying for the grants, are you looking at the grants? Are you thinking about it? And if you want more information on it, let us know and we can do that. And I want to thank you for that very prompt response. We have pretty well 100% reply on that one. Thank you. That's interesting. And many of you have already applied and thinking about it still too. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to close that poll and just get here are just some examples of the e-commerce website. But I want to sort of turn back also to Erin just to see if there was, sort of a repeat of some of the main points about the program. Erin?
Yeah, links are there for you to apply. Mention the deadline again next Thursday, the 17th of December. The application process is not too onerous. There's kind of standard information as well as a digital maturity assessment questionnaire that forms part of that application. If you have any trouble with it as you're filling it out, feel free to reach out to me. I can help you out there with any problems or any questions that you might have.
Thanks very much, Erin. Thank you. So takeaways, action points, Q&A. I guess this is something that you've seen from other websites, other webinars we've been doing so far. Just to reiterate from our point of view, the world is absolutely online, and it is a fantastic way for Atlantic Canadian companies to reach out and just get their international scope and connect with any company and any buyer anywhere in the world. So really worth taking advantage of, this Atlantic Canada Online Global Program. Take advantage of it. As Erin said, there are just 20 places available. Well, I don't know how many are still available, but there were 20 places available only. And deadline is as of next week for that. In terms of next steps, you can check out more of the webinars that we've been doing so far if you have an interest in that. And then really, gather your teams around the table and say, do we need international websites? If we do, then we need to apply and get busy on that. And I will try and find the links and put them in the chat box. And with that, I'm just going to say, are there any questions? Do you have any questions for us on South Korea? I guess there's one, which is just, there's two questions that have come in. The one is, yes, these webinars are recorded and you can download the previous webinars from our website, for example. If you wanted to hear ones about localized websites, and that was one of the very first webinars we did. There's also a mini version of it, which takes 15 minutes, talking about what is a localized website, what are the main criteria you need to have on a localized website, and why it's important. The second question is, how long does it take to build these websites? We generally take about 3 months. It depends a bit how much you already have ready. If you have a clear view, or if it's something that needs to be worked on internally, then but if everything is lined up, then it takes us about 3 months from kickoff to launch date on that. A third question just coming in here: where are these hosted? We host globally. There's actually some huge companies in hosting. We use, for example, Amazon Cloud. We use another service provider for server farms called Nexus, which have global areas. And so we would always host locally or an optimal way. We might not be able to host in Korea itself, but we would host next to it and then point at Korea, so that it appears to Naver as a domestic website, for example. So the hosting is actually really important for localized websites. You need to be hosted locally in order to be recognized as a local website, both by Google and by any search engine. Right, that brings me to a close today. Thank you all so much. I recognize that it's hard to do these webinars towards the end of the year in December. You must be all sort of like webinared out for the year, after the year we've had. We have 2 more webinars coming: Southeast Asia on Tuesday and then the USA on Thursday. We hope you'll join us. And in the meantime, have a great rest of the week. Keep on trading, stay safe, stay well. Aaron, thank you as always for accompanying me today on a journey to South Korea. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye all.